How much of this AI art stuff going around have you seen?
Interesting.
Yeah? I mean, so you know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I know what DALL-E is. There's a bunch of them. DALL-E, I think, started this, right, into popular culture.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of other things came about. I don't know whether they're connected or whatever. Like, I know that AI art exists. I know that the way you generate it is by just giving a string of text to one of these AI programs, and it will spit something out for you. Like, I've seen YouTube videos about it. I have friends that have participated in doing some searches. I have honestly don't care for me, right? Like, I know that people are like, this is fun. I'm going to see what comes out when I put this text in. Like, for me, I have zero interest in it right now. And I have like negative interest in it for some stuff that probably we're going to touch on if we're going to talk about this.
Ooh, negative interest.
Yeah.
Wait, negative thoughts or negative interest as in it's below boring? It's like...
I think it's interesting, right? Like, I don't think this is boring. I think that this is a really fascinating technology thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing.
Okay, and let me explain for the listeners if they're not familiar with this, because is it one of these? I've been kind of asking people about this, and it's very interesting to see the varied response, where some people are very like, "OMG, I can't believe what's happening about this," and other people are like, "I've never heard of this before."
Right.
The first thing where it really came across my radar is I don't know if you've seen that there's a Twitter thread here, which is the first example that caught my attention of AI generated art. And it's from this program called DALL-E.
Yeah.
And yes, the idea with DALL-E is you give the computer a sentence and it tries to generate... DALL-E in particular is like generating artwork, but it's generating an image to match the sentence.
DALL-E is apparently the best of these. Like, there's a bunch around. DALL-E seems to be the one that is the most advanced. And it's also closed. Like, not everyone can use it, but people get invitations and then like a limited amount of questions that they can give it, I think.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff is incredibly computationally intensive.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is very expensive to run. You cannot run it very well on just normal computers. You need like these Amazon style clusters of machines to actually do this stuff. But so this particular thread caught my attention because
this thread is incredible.
Someone came up with an idea of, hey, I'm going to try to ask DALL-E to make images of Kermit the Frog in various style movies. You need a prompt. This is the sentence. So the prompt is a still of Kermit the Frog in Blade Runner 2049. And so then you get an image which is supposed to match that. And I have to say, it looks exactly like you would imagine a still of Kermit the Frog in Blade Runner would look like. It's photorealistic. It captures the style of that futurism. And what makes this thread really great is they continue onward. And so it goes, a still of Kermit the Frog in The Matrix. And so here's what Kermit would look like if he was in The Matrix. The one that really caught my attention was a still of Kermit the Frog in Spirited Away.
It just looks like it's in the movie.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
The Spirited Away one was the most shocking because like Miyazaki has a real distinctive art style and it just absolutely nails it of, this is how Kermit the Frog would look like if he was in a Miyazaki movie.
Right, but here's the problem, right? How?
Well, let's get to that later, right? Okay. We'll get to the how later, right?
Okay.
But it don't think about it too hard. I just think the thing to establish here is that it is possible. And if you're listening to the show and you have never heard of this stuff before, like go look at this link in the description to see. It looks much better than however you're imagining it would be.
Yeah, it's legit. It's honestly, you could show me this and tell me somebody made a puppet and put it in, and I would believe you. Like, I would believe that it is real in many of these, or that somebody sat down and drew this. Like, I would believe you.
Yeah, you wouldn't look at it and think, oh, that was obviously a computer-generated image.
Absolutely not. For like 75% of these look perfect.
And in particular, the kind of weird photorealistic ones are interesting. Like there's a still of Kermit the Frog in Total Recall, which doesn't look like an animation. It really looks like, oh, someone made a model and then photographed
Or
it.
the Twin Peaks one.
Where's
It's
the Twin
way
Peaks
down
one?
there.
Yeah. So here's the other thing is about this that I think is interesting to realize immediately is, since this is a computer and you can just type in sentences, you can generate hundreds of these very quickly in the time like it would take an actual artist to make this stuff. You're looking at like, oh, this is thousands of human hours compressed down to a person's interesting afternoon. So which is the one that you wanted me to find? I don't know. I can't even.
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. Okay, I've got BoJack Horseman, Borderlands.
It's above that one.
Eraser. The Eraserhead one is also really good.
Yeah. Twin Peaks is above
the
the
Twin Peak
Eraserhead.
ones. Right. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
It just looks like a vinyl puppet.
Yeah, it looks like a vinyl puppet. These things are really quite good. This is the first one that caught my attention. And so I think you're totally right. In the timeline of how is this stuff going, DALL-E is the first one that started getting people's attention. And I think it's very easy to think like DALL-E is the best one. But I've been following this more closely. And what is really quite amazing is how fast this area is improving. That Twitter thread is from several months ago. And I'm going to send you one, which is a much more recent one. This is a Twitter thread that's comparing some of the different programs that are coming along. And so DALL-E, like you said, is a closed project. You can't get public access to it. But there's a group that's making another version of this, which is called Stable Diffusion. And this is like a publicly available open source version of the same thing. And the amount of improvement that this one is making is absolutely freaking breathtaking of how good Stable Diffusion is. And the thing with Stable Diffusion is, unlike DALL-E, which is sort of explicitly trying to be like art, Stable Diffusion is just trying to make images. So it's not necessarily trying to be like, oh, this is what the Mona Lisa would look like if Picasso painted it.
I don't understand the distinction.
So I think the distinction can be summed up in one of the examples here, which is if you scroll a little bit of the way down, the prompt is, behind the scenes shooting of the moon landing, Hollywood Studio, 1969. So the prompt there is create an image of the moon landing being faked in 1969. And I think if you look at those images, Stable Diffusion's one looks a lot more like just a natural photograph that someone would have taken, whereas the DALL-E 2 one almost has a little bit of a feeling of like a Renaissance painting, right? With the lighting and the way people are staged.
Right, but this is terrible.
Right? So this is, but do you see what I mean? Like if someone showed you that Stable Diffusion image, it's like, oh, that just looks like a photograph that somebody took while the moon landing was being faked.
Can't we with DALL-E, though, ask it to be photorealistic? Like maybe that wasn't the prompt? I don't know.
Yeah, so I think you have to be more explicit with the DALL-E stuff about trying to make it look real.
Right, because like right at the top of this thread, there's one which is the prompt is film still portrait of an old man, wrinkles, dignified look, gray silver hair. Like the DALL-E 2 one is like, I mean, Stable Diffusion is very good too, but like you know what? Actually, looking at them, I think I see what you mean from this one. The DALL-E 2 one looks like
it's like an amazing Pixar still.
If Pixar did it, where the Stable Diffusion one actually looks more like a photograph.
Yeah, the Stable Diffusion one looks like it's a real person.
Yep, I get it.
Now, here's the key thing. At this stage already, what we're talking about is like incredibly subtle, but I think it is interesting and important that Stable Diffusion isn't trying to be an interesting art project. Stable Diffusion is, it seems like they're really aiming for make an image of what we've typed. Anything. Like it just looks like an actual image. It's not art focused.
I'll put all these links in the show notes, by the way, so people can go, because you really should go see these images.
Yeah. So I think this is, it's really caught my attention because I cannot think of an area of technology recently that I have seen progress as fast as it has as this area of a machine is able to make an image that you couldn't possibly tell that a human had not made. And I think this is one of these things that is going to have an absolutely massive impact on the world very quickly. Like, if you scroll down, there's one that's particularly, to me, really captures the, like, what's going to happen with this. And the prompt is low poly game asset, Cthulhu monster, isometric view. And so this has generated what is a very good model for a computer game if you were going to have a little computer monster and you wanted it to be in this low poly art style.
Well, I mean, the Stable Diffusion one didn't do a good job.
Yeah, the Stable Diffusion one there, I think this is actually where you see the very fact that Stable Diffusion is trying to do real images.
Yeah.
Is like, oh, the Stable Diffusion one isn't low poly. It actually looks much more like a real thing.
Yeah, DALL-E 2 has done the best job there, I think, of
Right.
what you've asked for.
But that is also, it's the most artistic style.
Yeah.
Like it is the most artistic interpretation. Midjourney is another one of these projects that's doing a similar kind of thing. And I think the Midjourney one is quite interesting. But it's like, man, I have seen this go from like very good to getting like incredibly specific. And it seems to be getting much, much faster so quickly. And I look at this and I think, man, if I was in the graphic design world in particular, I would be terrified.
Right.
And Stable Diffusion, I couldn't find any good examples this morning. There's sort of one directly below there, but they also have like a lot of generate clip art about whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the areas of weakness is often like human stuff. But man, like they're coming for stock photography here. Like I think this stuff is going to just absolutely blow through the whole industry of stock photography and just destroy its existence very fast if someone can, instead of searching on a stock photo site for an image that happens to be the thing that they want, like actually just type in, I need 3 people in a room with this kind of laptop looking at a presentation that is this sort of thing. What do you think about all this, Myke? Like, what's your reaction looking at these images?
I don't like it.
Okay, why don't you like it?
I don't think this is a good precedent. I feel this way about deepfake technology. I feel this way about audio AI technology, which people are always trying to pitch me on.
Oh, yeah?
We get pitches from companies that are like, why even read your ads anymore?
Oh.
Let us just feed the ad copy into a AI-generated version of your voice, and you can save all this time.
Wow. Okay.
I'm just like, how about fundamentally, let me tell you why I think that's a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But there are people that want to do that to my voice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea that somebody could take my voice and make me say whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's the concern I have for this type of technology, that it can be used to create fake materials, and that moon landing thing is part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
How will anybody in the future know what's true?
Mm-hmm.
When in seconds you could create an image which looks real and share it. We already have enough of a problem with people misunderstanding what an image means or misunderstanding what a sentence means. What are we going to do when it is impossible to work out what's true by looking at something? When someone can force you to have that misunderstanding based on showing you something you're supposed to believe with your eyes because your eyes tell you what's true, right? And you see this image. Like if you said to me, oh my God, look at this image that was released of the moon landing.
Mm-hmm.
It was fake. I would be like, oh my God, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just looks like that, right? And so that's part one. And then part two is, what I care about is artists, individuals trying to make a living. And what they want to do is they want to be illustrators and they want to illustrate things for newspapers or whatever. And I worry about that entire industry of people that want to create, like graphic design, people like who work with you. Oh my God, how easy would it be? Because you have such a defined art style. There's so much of it. So, you could just make all of your animations in theory based on feeding it prompts. And I just don't like any. I I don't like the idea that all of these creative people would be put at risk, because I don't believe in the idea of a computer being able to have the artistic vision of a human. I just don't think that that's possible. And the bigger issue is all of this is feeding on the back of people's human beings already existing work, right? So go back to that Kermit thing. We talk about the Miyazaki movie. Well, it can only generate that because the AI has been pointed to the Miyazaki movies. Because there's no way it could know what that means. You can't say to an AI, put Kermit the Frog in Spirited Away if it's never seen what Spirited Away looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So it can create this. So like we would be in a situation where there is no more new inspiration anymore. We'll draw a line at 2045. That was the last time that human beings were allowed to make anything of their own. And now computers just make it all. And we're in this continued refresh of content that's just made based on everything that came in the 100 years before it. Like, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a very fun thing to play around with because it's fun right now. I don't like the future ramifications of this computer-generated content where there's no human interaction outside of, here's a string of text, now it's done.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me uncomfortable. I worry about the future of creative endeavors because of technology like this.
Yeah. When you say a sentence like, you don't think that the computer will be able to generate new things and it will always be a kind of remix, I don't go along with that as a general statement. Like
But that is how AI works, right? So like, you couldn't create an AI system without it having sucked in all this other information.
Yeah, no. Don't talking about. There's two separate issues here. Like there's a lot in this conversation, and there's one side that often comes out where people are like, it'll never have the inspiration of a human. And I do think that is true now, and that probably will be true for a while. But I don't think that's a fundamental truth.
I'm not sure we should pursue that anyway. How about we stop before the point where we allow computers to think on their own? How about that?
Yes, I didn't expect us to go like this hard and this fast into this topic, but I guess I also think why is this so interesting is because I think this is something that you can show to people, and I have shown to people if you try to have the conversation about, actually, I think AI is a terrifying existential threat for the human race. People are like, that's dumb. And you're like, okay, tell me what you think a computer can't do. And creativity is often very high up on that list. This stuff is doing a bunch of remixing. There is no denying about that. But this is also just like blows past what a lot of people think computers would even be possible of doing, creating this kind of art just immediately. And the thing that I see happen in these conversations is people over the past few months have been pointing out, they're going, oh yeah, the DALL-E stuff is really good, but it's not great at textures. You can see that the textures don't work perfectly on a bunch of the art that it generates. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. You wait 2 months and they release the new version and you go, oh, it's way better at textures. Like it keeps getting better at all of the things. They go, oh, it's not good at creating text on these images. And it's like, okay, I've already seen it keep getting better and better at text at every iteration. And I just think the final version of that for people is always, oh yeah, but ultimately it can't be creative in a new way. And I just don't think that argument will ultimately hold. Like I think there will be a version of this that generates new stuff that isn't just remixes of the old things in different kinds of ways. And there's huge concerns about that.
And I see the argument of like human beings create this way. We create based on what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't understand. Why can't we just continue to let humans do that? Why do we now need to have machines do it? Why do we need to have an AI platform that can create artwork with little effort put in? I don't know why that's needed in the world, right? Outside of it being a curiosity. If that's all it ever is it just exists as it currently does, like people share these things on Twitter, it's like, haha, look at this funny thing that I made. But that's not why people were building this.
Yeah.
And I am not comfortable with the idea of suggesting that the work of artistic people should be replaced by AI systems. I'm just not comfortable with that.
Yeah. I'll give you something that makes me really uncomfortable. So I'm going to send you a link. There's so many projects in this world, like it's hard to keep all of the different groups straight. So I'm simply not even going to try. Like there's another group that is working in this same field, and it's a project that they're calling textual inversion. And so right now with all of these systems, you kind of type in, oh, Kermit the Frog, but he's in Blade Runner. And you try Kermit the Frog in a bunch of different things. But what they don't have is any kind of sense of continuity. So all of these things are just individual one-off prompts. And either you write a prompt and you get a good image or you don't. But you can't create like a series of related images because everything just exists independently. So of course, people were like, aha, that's why like this won't go everywhere, because the machine doesn't really understand what you mean by like Kermit the Frog. You can't create a little animation with a stable Kermit the Frog. All of these things are just one-offs. And it's like, oh, well, textual inversion is working to solve that problem, where they're working to really nail down a particular concept that can then be expressed by these machines. And so they have a bunch of examples on this page of like, hey, if you give the computer a bunch of images, it's really going to try to nail down pulling out a particular concept that you want to repeat and to make this process easier. And so like, okay, you scroll down on their page and like there's a bunch of AI generated art images. But I just happened to click on one and follow it through. And I think it gets to the heart of like, boy, this is really uncomfortable. So they have a section called Learning to Represent Styles. You feed it a bunch of somebody's art and you try to teach it, this is a style that this person has made. And so they say like, okay, here's these 4 images that we've inputted. And now we can say like, oh, what if this person was to paint the streets of Paris? What if this person was to paint an adorable corgi? And they have this art style that's kind of like a colorful psychedelic style. And they happen to credit whose art style that is. And so it's this person called Queenie Art. And I clicked and went to follow this person. And it's someone on DeviantArt who died from cancer.
Great. Yeah, this is what we want.
Oh. Like, I presume that this was someone whose permission you got to be part of the project. No, this is a person who was an artist on DeviantArt and like had a very unique style. And their last post on DeviantArt is from several years ago saying they have stage 4 cancer and they're not going to live for another year. I'm sorry, what the just happened here? We can talk about like the machines copying people's styles, but this is a particularly awful example of like, oh, did the people who put together this project even know? Like, or they just...
But don't worry, Gray.
Yeah.
It says image reproduction authorized for non-commercial use only.
Yeah,
so it's okay.
Yeah, that's the reason it caught my attention. Is they had this explicit disclaimer like, we've made new art in this dead person style. It's for non-commercial use only. That was the whole reason I clicked the link. I was like, oh, what's the deal with this artist? I wonder, did they put a bunch of stuff in the Creative Commons? Like, I just didn't know. I was curious, and then
no copyright intended. It's fine.
Yeah, it's like I stumbled upon like, oh, they're dead. I feel like the world has been bumping up against this concept in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
Like the first place you start to see this is like, oh, having dead actors in movies, and like, okay, there's a bunch of ways in which you can kind of clear the rights on this. But now we have computer programs that are just like hoovering up everything that exists on the internet, and then also being able to like target an individual. Okay, that person. We want the machine to make more of that person. And they're dead. Just do it. And that feels really awful. It feels really awful in so many ways.
It's like an abuse of some kind. Well, like, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's like wrong. It just feels wrong. It's like taking advantage of them.
Yeah.
In a way. Like, it's very uncomfortable. That's a terrible example.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, it's one of the worst things I've stumbled upon in this whole world. Like, and I don't, I don't know the backstory. Like, maybe there's some like really reasonable explanation for this.
Hey, look, maybe this person would contribute to this system, whatever. But like, the point is not necessarily this one. It is just a proof of the point that this can and will happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and that there's like teams that are trying to solve the very specific problem of, we want to be able to replicate an exact thing consistently a bunch with like a stable concept of like this person's art style, like, or this object, and maintain it over time.
This is so messed up.
Yeah, it's incredibly messed up. And I just keep wondering when one of these systems is going to come across some kind of copyright constraint. And like the Miyazaki one is really the one that kind of caught my attention, because I feel like Miyazaki's movies, they're beloved. And as often the case with like someone who creates art that is beloved, it's partly because that creator has very specific ideas about how they want their artwork created, very often how they want it distributed, what circumstances under which they view it. I think another good example of this is that I always think of and give huge respect to is the author of Calvin and Hobbes. Like, Calvin and Hobbes is a hugely successful comic book strip. And part of the reason is because the creator was incredibly picky about how is this reproduced. He never wanted it merchandised. He never wanted like a bunch of different things done with it. And that's part of the reason why, like, these comics, they're really untouched and magical in a way that very few things are in the modern world. And like, I cannot express how sad I would be if someone was like, oh, hey, I made an AI that just spits out brand new Calvin and Hobbes strips all the time, because I'm sad that the author isn't making them anymore. It's like, no, please don't do that. That's terrible. And also kind of like ruins the thing that you're trying to do. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's incredible and scary economic impacts for everyone who works in the art world in any way.
Yeah.
And there's also just massive society impacts coming from this kind of thing in like every possible direction that you can look. Like I said, there's this weird kind of taking advantage of people who've put their art out in the world. And then there's just like you said, the mere question of, man, like, if you thought it was hard to know what things are real before, when you can fake photographic, and we all know very soon video evidence of anything is like, man, that is terrible for the world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, if this was such a thing that could be constrained to, isn't this a fun little curiosity, I have no problem with it. I think it's fun to see this stuff produced, right? Like, to see people creating Kermit the Frog in the style of Twin Peaks. It's like, this is really funny, right? Like, this is like a funny little thing. Share it on Twitter, and everybody says, hey, look what I put into DALL-E, right? I have no problem with that, because it's like, well, here's the thing we're doing, and it's like not no problem. I barely have any problems with it. It's just like, whatever. We know it's a fake image, etc.
Yeah, in the same way that if an actual human had created, like, hey, I'm a real fan of Kermit the Frog, and I'm a real fan of Blade Runner, and look at me, I put them together. Like, I don't think anyone would really have a problem with that. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just like, oh, this is fun fan art of things that you like.
But it's the next phase of it that I just can't reconcile in my brain. Of like, what comes after this then?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to special effects artists? What happens to illustrators? What happens to podcasters? Like, what happens if we just decide that we're all good with the AI just doing this for us.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's a good thing, and we don't need it, right? And so I don't really understand what the point of it is, especially when there's going to be a selection of people that take this technology, package it, and sell it to companies to be like, you don't need this anymore, like all these people. Give us some money, which is less, and you can use our software.
Yeah. What I have just seen develop recently with this stuff is the beginning of the commercialization of it. And so there's a weird website which I don't entirely understand like how or why this works, but there's a website already where people can like buy or sell good prompts for generating art. Because right now, since it is so costly to generate this stuff, like you don't want to mess around unnecessarily. It's like already people are doing this thing of like, oh, I can sell you a pack of prompts that will help you cut down on the difficulty of figuring out what looks cool. Actually, there's a good article I found, which is like trying to get an image of like a llama playing basketball. And like the key phrases that you want are dramatic backlighting. Like that's one of the things that makes this photo of a llama playing basketball awesome. But so I think that this website is trying to commercialize that. But the most directly commercial thing that I've seen, which I'll send you, is a Photoshop plugin that connects to Stable Diffusion. And so it's like, okay, this is already being worked into professional tools. And you can see like, oh, using this plugin, a Photoshop expert who doesn't have any artistic skill can just start selecting images of the screen and ask Stable Diffusion to fill in what they actually want in this image. And I just think like, oh my God, like here we go. Like this is totally the beginning of, it has real commercial purposes. It is not just like you said, a fun toy. And given how fast this stuff has developed, like I cannot imagine where this is going to be a year from now. I keep seeing people say like, oh, you're not going to be able to make video out of this. Like it's just going to be still images. Like, guys, video, I hate to break it to you, it's just a sequence of still images. Like it's not magic. It's just way more computationally intensive.
Yeah.
But I've already seen videos on YouTube that I am absolutely sure are 100% AI generated, where it's like there's a voice, it sounds pretty good, but it makes me suspicious. Like I don't think it's actually a person. It basically sounds like it's summarizing through language models like a Wikipedia article about a topic, and they have a bunch of stock images which are mostly connected to the narration but not entirely.
Yep.
And it's like that stuff exists on YouTube already. Like I'm very certain that those things are AI generated, and they're just going to keep getting better and better and better. And I met a guy at a conference who was working on some AI research stuff. And he said that he had instituted this guideline that he was no longer reading or watching anything that he wasn't absolutely sure was produced by a real person. At the time, I thought this was kind of crazy, right? I thought like, whoa, dude, you're really like, that's a real stance to take.
Mm-hmm.
And, the more I see of the stuff that Stable Diffusion is doing, the more I feel like, man, I don't know, like maybe that just is a good policy very soon. Like only read stuff that is written by a person, because we just haven't touched on it here, but I think the art stuff really visually catches people's attention. But there are projects that do this with language where they write things. And can you tell that a person did or did not write this sentence? No, you can't tell. And like the language models are also getting very, very good, very fast. And they're also really starting to understand human concepts in a way that's like, boy, this is all just absolutely terrifying. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's significantly less crazy now than it was at the time, or maybe like, oh, this guy just could kind of see what was coming. But yeah, I don't know how we're going to survive in a world where it is incredibly cheap to produce a huge amount of content and distribute that content widely, compared to what humans can create and distribute. Like, we have enough problems sorting through the world when it's just dealing with stuff that humans make. I don't know how this is going to go down when at some point the majority of material being generated is not being generated by humans. Like, I think that is going to be a very confusing world to live in.
Before we go,
on that cheery note, for
note,
action you can take today for something that is unambiguously good, St. Jude.
stjude.org/relay. Go there now, donate, find out more about fundraising, tune into the Podcastathon on September the 16th. Be a part of this. Let's cure childhood cancer together.